Today we have with us Jake. He's one of our clients. He's a superstar client. He's had some amazing results, and he's taken the time to talk to us today about his experience applying to business school. Hi, Jake.
Hey, Kanisha, glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I'm just going to jump right in. So my first question is for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself. Make sure to tell us what you did before business school and why you wanted to go to business school.
Yeah, so I graduated from Tufts in 2012. Immediately after graduating, I went out to LA and tried to work in entertainment. I spent 2 years working in LA. I worked for a Nickelodeon show called Sam and Cat. I was a production assistant. I also worked for a YouTube channel producing music videos. And after about 2 years in LA, though, I realized that while I really liked working in entertainment, it can be a tough career path to take. And I didn't want to sort of put myself down. Very uncertain career. But I came back to the East Coast where I'm from. And it took me a few more years really to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. You know, at the moment, I've been working at Kaplan Test Prep for a year in their bar exam group, not teaching, but doing more like operation, sort of content management for the courses, some sales related work, kind of a combination of different things. And I really like what I'm doing now. But, you know, over the years since college, it did become clear to me that as a history major in school, I really did need some more skills, just sort of technical skills, like both hard skills and soft skills, I would say, just more knowledge of the things that business school teaches, and also just like leadership development, the sort of training of just how to do interviews, how to network, how to sort of managerial communications, all those different things. And it became very clear to me that business school helped me a lot. And to be, you know, perfectly upfront, like I actually started thinking about this a few years ago and really sort of shook it off. And it was only in the last like year and a half that it really became clear to me how beneficial it would be.
Okay. And would you be open to sharing some of the reasons why you were shaking it off or shrugging it off or maybe even procrastinating?
I think a little procrastination. I think especially maybe like 2 or 3 years ago when it first came up, I didn't feel like I really knew what I wanted to do. And it seemed like it didn't make sense to go to business school if I didn't know what I wanted to do afterwards. And that was, I mean, I'm sure that's partially true. I think that was also a little bit of my younger self just being a little bit maybe immature. So that was certainly one hesitation. I don't think I really knew that much about what business school really was. And when I think about it, even, you know, 6 months ago when I started really applying, I knew very little comparatively to what I know now about business school. So I think a lot of my hesitation was just not really understanding business school. And also a lot of my hesitation, or a lot of the reason I don't have the hesitation anymore, is that it became clearer to me that where I stood with just a undergraduate degree as a history major was really not enough to get me to the point professionally that I wanted to be at.
Excellent. So it sounds like you tried out a lot of different jobs and industries. And one of the things you learned for sure was like, hey, I'm going to hit a ceiling with my history degree. Business school is the next right step for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, here's the juicy question. Our audience always wants to know the stats of other applicants. As much as you're willing to share, I know that they would love to know your GPA from Tufts, whatever range or precision of your GMAT score you want to share. And you've already shared about your work experience. I do just want to emphasize that Jake was really open with how he did a lot of things in his career. So it definitely wasn't a perfect kind of graduate from college, go to McKinsey for 2 years career path. It was a little bit more finding your way.
Yeah. And I think I didn't know how that would affect me in the application process. And that was certainly something I was a little bit unsure of, how that work background, and also admittedly salary history, because I haven't, you know, in entertainment and some of the stuff I did afterwards, I haven't made as much money as a consultant or a paralegal or, you know, these different professions might be, or investment banker. So I didn't know if that would hurt me as well. So at Tufts, my overall GPA was 3.35. My major GPA, which I don't even think was necessarily sent to like all the schools, that was like 3.67. So right about like B plus, A minus for that. The GMAT, I took it 3 times and the final score 730.
Okay.
Which is 96th percentile. I got 42 on the verbal, 48 on the quant. And that turns into 730 on the 800 scale.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your stats. So just to read 3.35 from Tufts, took the GMAT 3 times, ended up with a 730, which of course is awesome. And then you had a colorful work history with a questionable salary history. Yeah.
And I will just point out, I had a sort of weird thing with the GMAT, and this is not to scare anyone, but the first time I took it, there actually was a computer issue. So after a long back and forth with the GMAT company, I actually got that first score sort of taken off my official report. So I basically took the test 3 times, but because of a technical issue in the first time, it wasn't really a clean administration. So I only have 2 scores on my official report.
Got it. Wow. I would love to know more about that technical issue. And I'm sure people will go crazy on the forums wondering what that was. And because that have happened to me. And that's why I have a 620. But we're not going to delve into it right now.
All I would say to people who are worried about it, they will work with you, but you have to be persistent.
Okay. Got it. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Now, one question I did not give you ahead of time, but it's very important for me to ask, is for you to share your results so far with getting in as compared to your stats, so that people, now that they know your stats, where you got in.
Yeah, so I applied to 10 schools, which is probably more than a lot of people do. I mean, I've talked to people who only applied to 3 or 4, but I didn't, as I said, I didn't know what the strength of my candidacy would be. So I applied to Yale I did everything. So Yale was round 1. I actually did Columbia early decision. That was sort of a late choice by me. And I just was like, I'm in New York already. It's an amazing school. It sort of seemed like it would boost my odds to do that. So I applied their early decision round 1, or obviously round 1. I applied to Cornell in their November round, which is sort of their round 2, but they sort of, because they have an October and a November round, they also have a January and a March. So it's still pretty early round for Cornell. And then I did Duke, their October round, which might be round 2 actually. And then I did 6 schools through the consortium, which were NYU, University of Virginia, University of Michigan, Carnegie Mellon, Indiana, and Georgetown.
Fantastic. So I'm going to interrupt here to share with everyone what the consortium is. I won't make you do that pitch, but then after I do the pitch for the consortium, I want us to talk just a little bit about your experience applying to business school with us through the consortium.
And then I should get to the results as well, I guess.
Oh, that's right. We only did the apply. So first I'll talk about the consortium and then we'll get to your results. We'll make people wait. So the consortium is an organization comprised of a group of business schools. It started many years ago. I think it's at least 30 years old.
Yeah, it's 1966, I think.
There we go. You know your consortium facts. The Art of Applying is not affiliated in any way with the consortium. We're just huge fans. And so the Consortium for Graduate Study and Management is a group of business schools that got together to mutually help each other because they all really needed more Hispanic American, Native American, and African American students. A few years ago, the consortium actually opened up the organization to U.S. citizens and permanent residents of any background, any ethnicity, as long as your work experience or volunteer experience advances the mission of the consortium. The mission of the consortium is to increase the numbers of underrepresented U.S. minorities in top business schools, but with the ultimate goal of having more underrepresented minorities to be in top management and leadership positions in business. So anyone of any race, as long as they support the mission of the consortium, can apply to business school through the consortium. The first level of membership is really just, I'm in the consortium. You're a consortium fellow. You get access to the orientation program, which is really awesome, and actually some early interview recruiting, and as well as a network that spans across all the consortium schools. The second level of benefit is that plus half tuition fellowship, and the third level of benefit is that plus a full tuition fellowship. So the consortium is a really awesome program. It's sort of an alternative application. It's not less work. It's just a slightly lower total application fee, as well as there are supplemental essays. So it's not less work than applying through the regular way. It's just more of an alternative path if you are eligible to apply, that I recommend anyone who's eligible to apply through the consortium. Not every business school is in it, but some really awesome schools. Like Jake just said, we've got Yale, Stern, Haas, like some really heavy hitters in the consortium. And Jake, do you have any sort of underrepresented minority background?
So I'm Jewish. I mean, but I'm not any of the groups that you discussed. And I certainly, when we first spoke, I was hesitant about applying to the consortium. I think mostly because I didn't understand what it actually was. And I'm certainly glad I did do it. I mean, first of all, as you said, it's very good school. So I wasn't like pushing myself to like apply to schools I didn't really want to go to. There's a very good chance I'll end up going to a consortium school. So that's the first thing. And the other thing that you sort of mentioned is that it's also like a common app. So I would say I do think it saved me some work, mostly in the sense of only having to ask those recommenders to do one for those 6 schools, which was very helpful because there is already a burden on those people a little bit. And it was a peace of mind for me to know that once they got it in there, I had it in for 6 schools and I didn't have to bother them. So that actually, for me, was a big thing. As you said, it's not really more work. It's not more work than applying to those schools individually. And I think of anything, it's a little less. And I believe I paid $300 as the total application fee for all 6 schools, as opposed to, you know, 200 to 300 for each of those if I had done it separately.
Wow.
So I really did appreciate the common app element of that as well.
Got it. And so once you were like, okay, I understand what the consortium is, can you talk to us a little bit about what you did either in the past or more recently that made you eligible for the consortium and made you confident about applying to the consortium?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we just talked about when I started working with you was figuring out a way to volunteer. And that was something I started doing. So I was tutoring students, mostly Hispanic, students in Upper Manhattan for the SAT. So these were juniors and seniors in high school who I was working with. I'm trying to remember now what the other things were that I discussed in my essay, but there certainly were various things in my work experience that sort of tied into that. And I had worked at an education startup before Kaplan, really tried to help like sort of first generation college students and minorities strengthen their college applications and get themselves to college. And, you know, I worked on webinars and I went to some events to try to help them understand the ways they could boost their candidacy, even if they didn't have, you know, the thousands of dollars to spend on these elite, you know, college admissions people or SAT tutors and the different things they could do.
Okay, so one thing I do want to emphasize in Jake's story with the consortium is while he did have some experience doing things that advanced the mission of the consortium, he wasn't the superhuman guy doing all the things in the world. He was really doing 1 or 2 activities, one of which started more recently, more closer to your application process.
Yeah, and that actually was a very rewarding experience for me. And actually those students, I heard back from the group afterwards, and they all raised their scores like between 50 and 100 points from the first time. I enjoyed working with them, and I'm glad to see that my help also had results.
That's awesome. And what I really like about what you did for your volunteer experience is that you took something that you were already good at since you killed the GMAT and you used it to be a benefit to these children, which helped your application, was a rewarding experience, but is also just like a good thing to do in the world. So it's like a triple win. And so, as I said before, Jake was one of our clients. Now, you applied to all your consortium schools with us. And then did you apply to any of your non-consortium schools with us?
So I think I had you guys look. I'm trying to remember.
We looked at Columbia, early decision. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I certainly did some stuff with Cornell with you guys. I didn't work with any other consultant. So okay. I think you helped in various ways on everything.
Okay. Yeah.
In between the essays or like the phone calls and sort of interview prep. And by the way, just to go back to the results.
Oh, we never said, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I applied to 10 schools. So Yale, I got rejected from. Columbia, which I applied to early decision, I also got rejected from. Although the nice thing about the Columbia early decision application is that they get back to you in like 3 weeks. So it wasn't like, it's a really quick turnaround. I wasn't waiting that long. Mm-hmm. Then with Duke and Michigan, it was interesting. I kind of they basically sort of said they weren't giving me an answer round 1, and they were going to let me know by December if I was sort of waitlisted or pushed to round 2 or just rejected. I did end up getting rejected to those schools. Okay. I got interviews at University of Virginia, Darden, Carnegie Mellon, Indiana, and Georgetown. And then I was waitlisted at NYU. And at the time of this, I'm still waitlisted at NYU. And then of those 5 interviews that I got, I ended up not getting in Virginia. I'm still waiting on Cornell. And then I got into the other 3, Carnegie Mellon, Indiana, and Georgetown, and got significant scholarship money from all 3.
Can we hear about the money?
Yeah. So without me doing anything, Georgetown gave me $30,000 a year, and Indiana gave me $20,000 a year. And then Carnegie Mellon also gave me $20,000 a year.
Can we briefly talk about the financial aid appeal process? It shouldn't even be called a process. It should really just be called an email, right? So tell us what happened.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure, and I reached out to you, and we talked about this very briefly. And you said, you basically directed me to a resource you had already created on the site about how to do a financial aid appeal letter. And really all I did was just email the admissions office at Carnegie Mellon, telling them I got into other schools with significant money. I attached the acceptance letters to Indiana and Georgetown, so they saw what I was referring to and that it was real. And then it just wrote me back matching the Indiana offer of $20,000 a year. So I there was no in between. There was no fight. It was basically I sent an email and I got $20,000 a year.
Fantastic. $40,000 email.
Yeah, exactly. I was shocked because I anticipated a much more lengthy, involved process.
And sometimes it can be more lengthy and involved, but The most important part of this story is that I really urge all of our clients and anyone watching this, whether you're our client or not, that schools don't like it that I say this, but it's just the truth. No matter how much they give you, if they give you a scholarship or give you nothing, politely and humbly ask for more, providing evidence that you've received more from other schools. Even if you haven't received more from other schools, you can always politely and humbly ask. And you can just visit the website, theartofapplying.com. We have a blog post called How to Write a Financial Aid Appeal Letter. And my clients have had great results with just asking, just ask. And it's easier if you have offers from other places. So how did you choose the Art of Applying? There's a lot, much bigger companies, much better known companies with slicker websites and fancier technology. What made you choose the Art of Applying?
Yeah, so I had done a GMAT course through another company, and they had a admissions consulting arm as well that's very well respected in New York. And I was looking into working with them. I did a free consultation, and I didn't really see a package that sort of worked for what I needed, because I didn't need the full start to finish. Like, I had no idea what I'm doing, like, even though I didn't have that much of an idea of what I was doing. But what I really wanted was a sort of package where I could just get help on the different essays for the different schools, practice interviewing, get, just sort of talk with a consultant about some of the questions and uncertainties I had. I had actually heard about Art of Applying through my grandparents, who work with someone that you work with. But what actually really sold me on it was I watched a video you made with another former student, Kenny, and I thought it just really seemed great. I thought both you and he seemed great. And that's what made me realize I have to reach out to them now, because it's already August and I want to get my applications in for round one. And, we talked about different packages that would make sense for me. And I think what I used was the Good to Great package, which was, I think, a pretty generous package, actually. 4 rounds of essay editing, where each round could be up to 3,000 words, 4 rounds of email coaching, 4 1-hour phone calls with one of your consultants, and probably a few other things that I'm forgetting as well. But that was really perfect for what I needed. And I think obviously had very lucrative results as well.
Fantastic. So you would say you got a great return on your investment.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the depth, like the knowledge and training that I sort of got on the calls was excellent. I felt like over prepared for all the interviews, which is exactly what I want. I thought the essay editing was really helpful. And I felt like there were sort of any question I had, I could, between the email coaching or talking with a consultant, I could work those things out.
Fantastic. And just to be clear, Jake did not work directly with me. Of course, he had access to me for any sort of like urgent questions or questions that for whatever reason the consultant wouldn't be able to answer, but he worked with a consultant on my team. So I don't want you to watch this video and be like, okay, I'm only going to get great results if I work with Kanisha. If you would like to pay the premium to work with me, you're welcome to. But we have an excellent team, and Jake is a great example of someone who's really happy with his experience. Did you have any concerns about working with a consulting firm or with our company in particular? And how did you get over those concerns?
Yeah, actually, the other thing I just forgot to say was also that the package included the resume editing, which was very helpful. And 4 rounds of resume editing, which was very generous, I thought, and really helped me turn a sort of wobbly resume into a much, much stronger one that I am much happier with. I think concerns with a consultant, there's always sort of the usual things like, you just don't necessarily, it's hard to really vet, I guess, a consultant necessarily. But I saw the video with Kenny, who I mentioned. I was in an interesting position because I knew someone that worked with you guys who I did talk to, and she spoke very highly of you, Kanisha, and the rest of the team. So that was obviously a big selling point. And I think, now that I've gone through the process and worked with a few of your consultants and then also interviewed at schools, I feel like it gave me exactly what I needed. And I really felt like, especially what really struck me was like the interview prep that I did. I think I felt when I actually had interviews, I felt very well prepared.
That's awesome.
And I think the practice interviews were probably a little more challenging than the actual interviews that I had. And that's exactly what you want. It's sort of like an athlete who like swings the bat with the weight on it and then takes the weight off and then it's light. I really felt like that I was prepared for any question that they would throw at me.
That's awesome. I love that analogy. And I did not know that baseball players did that.
Yeah.
And let's see. So what did you like best about working with your consultant?
I think that's a good question. I mean, I think there were a few different things. As I said, the sort of flexibility just of the process of being able to send like a bunch of different essays at once and get things back. I think certainly a very friendly team. I talked on the phone with you a few times, talked with a few of your consultants, and everyone was very friendly and very helpful. I felt like it was a pretty casual process, which I really liked. It wasn't like formal or stressful. Obviously, I don't have anything to really compare it to, but I certainly found it to be a pleasant, easy experience. And I think also very friendly and enthusiastic. And, if I've had any questions sort of like after my applications were in, like very receptive and helpful as well. So I just think it was a very sort of seamless, painless, easy process.
Oh, I like that. Seamless, painless, easy. I got to use that on the website.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other applicants who are at the beginning of the process of thinking about going to business school, or maybe this is the year I'm going to apply?
Yeah. So I would say get started early. I think, for me, so I started studying for the GMAT in November of 2015.
Okay.
And then had to get applications in by September through November of 2016. So it's less than a year, which might seem like a lot of time, but it really wasn't, because the GMAT it can be a lot to study for, especially for me. I really wasn't that familiar with those math concepts anymore. Even some of the verbal stuff, it took me a while to get back at. So I would say give yourself time. And if you're thinking you might want to apply, just start working on it, because worst case is you study for the GMAT, you take the GMAT, you do badly, and you don't apply to business school. But I think most likely, if someone studies for the GMAT and really works hard, you will get a score, I think, that will get you into some good schools. That's one thing. I think if I were doing it again, I may have tried to speed up the GMAT process. So I took it and started my course in November. First took the GMAT in May, had that incident I mentioned at the beginning where the whole test was sort of invalidated.
Yeah.
I took it again in June. I got a 700 the second time. So that was a decent score. And I could have stopped there, but I did sort of feel like I could do better. And my impression was that if I could get past that 710, 720 hump, I would really put myself into a new range of schools and options. So I retook it at the end of August. I'm glad I retook it, but I think if I could have done it again, I might have finished with the GMAT a little bit sooner. Maybe finished with it June or July, because it was hard for me to sort of multitask and study for the GMAT while also working on applications. So I think one piece of advice is to finish with the GMAT by the beginning of that summer before you're applying. I ended up applying, as I said, to round 1, or for a few schools, they're round 2. I would certainly recommend doing that as well. My impression is that it does increase your odds of getting in, especially if it's between that and like round 3 or 4. And the other thing it gave me was, since I said I wasn't sure how my results would be, it gave me the sort of peace of mind to know that if I got rejected everywhere round 1, I still had round 2, and if really necessary, round 3.
That's right. That was me and Kenny. Right. Yep. Working together on round 2. Fantastic.
So I think my main piece of advice would be give yourself time to study for the GMAT, finish with the GMAT by June or July of when you're applying, and then, try to get applications in round 1. But I also think there were a few schools. I was going to apply to Cornell for their first round, which is October 5th. And then, so the way it works is, if people don't know, is there's usually a fall round, a January round, and then a March round. Yes. Some schools, though, will also have will have 4 rounds, and they might have a September deadline, a November deadline, a January deadline, and a March deadline, something like that. Yeah. So Cornell is one of the schools that has I think an October deadline and a November deadline. So because I was applying to 10 schools, I pushed it back and just submitted that in November instead of October. But, again, by starting early, I had the flexibility to push it off, because if I had been planning on applying to Cornell round 2, it would have been harder to say, okay, well, now I'm going to do it round 3.
Now, what would you say to someone who's like, that's your thing. You got a 730. I'm not going to get a 730, and I'm going to wait to start working on my essays until I get a 700.
I would say don't do those things. But I think when I took my first GMAT practice test, I wasn't even at 600. I think I was at 570 or something. And, when I took the first GMAT, the score that ended up getting invalidated, basically I lost 15 minutes on the verbal section. And on that test, I got a 660, which is an okay score, especially for not having full time, but not what I wanted to be at. I studied for 6 weeks, really hard, did a lot of practice tests, got up to 700, and then basically did the same thing, between the 2 months when I took it the third time. So I really believe people can do well on the GMAT, even if they're starting from a low point. But you have to study under timed conditions.
Yes.
I think there's 2 really important things. Do small sets of practice questions timed, and then do lots of practice tests. And that's not, that's basically saying to someone no, why don't you get 30 cavities filled or something? It's not what anyone wants to hear, but you really do need to do it. And something I started doing towards the end was just doing full sections of the GMAT timed, but not a full test. So I would do a full quant section or a full verbal section, but not the full 3-hour thing. There's lots of good practice tests that are available. So people shouldn't feel like they're going to run out of practice material.
It's really great advice, all of that. Great strategy.
Yeah. I think I got a little bit like obsessed with the GMAT by the end of it. And I remember especially with like the some of those math things, I started seeing the math everywhere. But I really got into it. And I do think it's like fun. And, if you have that sort of approach, I think that'll make the studying easier. And I also would say that the skills don't go into the GMAT and resent the process and resent the material, because I do think that what you learn in the GMAT will be helpful both for business school and just life in general. Like I find myself using grammar more correctly now, more correctly. Just proving my point. But I use better grammar than I used to. I think I'm just more aware of those little verbal rules, and it brought back a lot of math knowledge that I'm glad to have, and I think will help me in business school. The other part of your question was about essays, I think.
So basically that balance between, I really find many people overemphasize the importance of the GMAT. It's very important. And I think it was especially important for you because your GPA was under 3. It was fine, but it wasn't like a 3.6 or more. So it was really, really important for you. And so I don't mean to say that the GMAT isn't important, but I do think people overemphasize the GMAT and then really give their essays the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I was saying of trying to, if I were doing it again, I would finish up the GMAT a little sooner, because I did feel a little, just the way I sort of paced myself, it's going to take you a little longer than you might think. Like I started working on the essays probably in July, but I just couldn't get anything done. And that was also one of the reasons why I realized I needed to work with a consultant, because I was just very stuck and having writer's block and just not even really sure like what to do. I felt very overwhelmed by the process. Mm-hmm. So if you're the kind of person who might have that, then I think starting early is a good thing, because you have to know you might have like a month of just false starts basically and working on it, but not getting enough done. So
you answered the question. Fantastic. And then tell us, my next question is what's next for you, but we're still waiting to find out.
Yeah.
But definitely business school. You're definitely going to business school in the fall.
Yeah. And I think the more I've sort of thought about it and sat in on classes and read about things, the more excited I am to go. And I said at the beginning that I wasn't sure a few years ago if I wanted to go, and I was kind of pushing it off. And I think now I'm really looking forward to it. And while it may have been better in some ways to go a little earlier, I think I'm probably at a more mature point and can get more out of it and understand just how valuable it will be for me going this fall. As opposed to if I'd gone 2 years ago, it might have saved me some sort of job application stress and career uncertainty, but I do feel like I'll get a lot out of it. And I'm 2 years more mature now than I would have been if I'd gone earlier.
Fantastic. And you did mention, I don't know your age unless I look it up in your client file. Do you want to share your age so people can put all the numbers together?
Yeah, I'm 27, so I'm 5 years out of college. I'll turn 28 when in fall 2017. So we're sort of right as business school is starting. My impression is that's about average for business school students. It seems like most school, the average years out of college is about 4 or 5. So I'll be 5 years out of college when I start. So actually, I think this is sort of the perfect amount of time in between college and graduate school.
I agree. Anything else you want to add?
No, I don't. I'm trying to think if there was anything. I think I'm good. I mean, I talked about the GMAT and the essays, and definitely recommend starting the process early, because it's doable, but it's, obstacles will come up that you might not expect. And just the more time you can have, better.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Jake. It was wonderful to hear, even though I was on the ride with you. It was great to just talk about it again with you. I think that this information is going to help a lot of people, inform a lot of people, and inspire some people who are on the fence and maybe putting it off and I don't know. And they're like, wait, this guy did it. I can do it too.
Exactly. And, I talked about my GMAT score, but I think like I've heard of other people with much lower GMAT scores getting into great schools as well. Sure, you've worked with people like that or heard of those people. So people shouldn't be like deterred because they have a low GPA or a low GMAT. Don't let that stand in your way.
I completely agree. And I thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, no problem. Great to talk with you.
Thanks for watching. Are you ready to take your application process to the next level? The Art of Applying helps you get into the graduate school of your dreams and get money to pay for it. Book a free quick call from the link in the description to get started. And subscribe to our channel for more application tips and success stories.